Part 15. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 141. Chapter 141 Buying Clothes. On Chang'an Street, Sulayun was walking with Lu Suiya to a cloth shop. Qilayu and Lu Suiya's personal maid Xiao followed behind. Being busy with embroidery these days, Sulayun forgot that Lu Hong and Su Changjing had already chosen a house and were waiting for the imperial edict to move to Xinlu Mansion. At that time, the Lu Mansion will hold a banquet. As the eldest daughter of the Lu Mansion, Lu Suiya certainly cannot dress too shabbily. It's just that Sulayun was a little confused as to why Lu Suiya had to come to the cloth store to buy the clothes to be worn at the banquet. Logically speaking, Su Changjing should have made arrangements. Sulayun did not ask this question. In her previous life, she noticed Su Changjing's indifference towards Lu Suiya. The two were not like mother and daughter, but more like enemies. This is just Su Changjing's attitude towards Lu Suiya. Of course, Lu Suiya also regards Su Changjing as her mother. After entering the cloth shop, the shopkeeper came forward and greeted, "Are you two ladies here to buy ready-made clothes? Or are you buying fabrics?" Lu Suiya hesitated for a moment and asked, "Shopkeeper, what are the prices of ready-made clothes and fabrics here?" Ouch, I don't know how to explain this lady's question. The shopkeeper of cloth shop scratched his head and replied, "I can only tell you, if you are in a hurry, lady, it is best to buy ready-made clothes. Don't be in a hurry, you can buy fabrics and design them yourself, which is also very good. The prices are definitely different, but it depends on how you choose the style or fabric, so I can tell you the price." Lu Suiya thought for a while. "Shopkeeper, please show me the ready-made clothes first." "Okay, ladies, this way." The shopkeeper of Buzwang led Lu Suiya and Sulayun to the right. There are a lot of ready-made clothes on the cabinet, so colorful and dazzling that it's hard to choose for a while. Lu Suiya was looking at the ready-made clothes under the introduction of the shopkeeper. Sulayun just followed and listened to the conversation between the two. "Miss, you made a good choice for this one. This is my new ready-made garment. Both the fabric and the pattern are of high quality." Hearing the introduction from the shopkeeper of cloth shop, Lu Suiya squatted in the air with her hand holding the ready-made clothes, not knowing whether to put them down. "Miss, there is a place to change here, why don't you try it first?" The shopkeeper of cloth shop was so enthusiastic that Lu Suiya couldn't refuse, so she had to take the clothes in. Seeing Sulayun standing aside, the shopkeeper of Buzwang rolled his eyes and took the first blue dress and handed it to Sulayun. "Miss, I think this dress suits you very well. Do you want it to try it?" This dress was placed separately. When the shopkeeper went to pick it up, he wiped his hands specially. Obviously it's expensive. As the shopkeeper of a cloth shop, he has seen more clothes and fabrics than customers. How could he not tell that this young lady is the real rich owner? Just the hairpin on his head could buy half of his store. How could he let such a wealthy owner off? "No need, I just came with that lady today." Sulayun spoke mildly and rejected the proposal of the shopkeeper of Buzwang. Seeing this, the shopkeeper of the cloth store did not give up immediately. Instead, he put down his clothes and said, "Miss, would you like to go and have a look at the fabrics? We have some new fabrics here. I guarantee you will like them." "I'll wait for her to come out and then take a look." Sulayun still refused. Just the tone became stronger. At this moment, the shopkeeper of the cloth shop also understood that this rich owner could not make any money from her today. However, although the person who went in to change clothes just now did not look very wealthy, he was not short of money to be with this young lady. Since he can't make money from this lady, it's the same thing if he makes more money from that lady. After a while, Lu Suiya changed her clothes and came out. She chose a dark green skirt with several hyacinth flowers embroidered under the skirt. When it moves, it seems that a faint stream of light can be seen. Overall it is very concise. The shopkeeper of cloth shop hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Miss, your clothes look really good." Standing in front of the bronze mirror, Lu Suya looked around and seemed very satisfied. "Shopkeeper, what's the price of this dress? You also know that the fabric and workmanship are of excellent quality, but the price is a little expensive." The shopkeeper of the cloth shop rubbed his fingers and counted the number. "It costs a full 35 taels. 35 taels." Lu Suya frowned and hesitated. She only took less than 50 taels with her when she went out. She bought this dress and some jewelry. How could she afford it? This dress. Seeing that Lu Suya was about to refuse, the shopkeeper of Buzz Wang's eyes flashed and he hurriedly said, "I think I'm destined to be with you, young lady, so I might as well give you a cheaper one. How about 28 taels?" Lu Suya was still hesitant, but a little moved. Just as he was about to speak, Sulayun stopped him. "Shopkeeper, is this cloth made of Yusi brocade?" Sulayun looked at the shopkeeper of cloth shop, and when he said the word Yusijan, the shopkeeper of cloth shop knew that he had met someone who knew the goods. "Yes." The shopkeeper of Buzwang responded, but his expression changed a little. Sulayun continued, "The rain silk brocade is intertwined with white threads and other colors, so that it can show the feeling of white and white. It is indeed difficult to embroider on the rain silk brocade. If you are not careful, you will destroy the characteristics of the rain silk brocade." Just now the shopkeeper said the workmanship was excellent, but I don't think so. After listening to Sulayun's words, Lu Suya pulled up a corner and looked at the embroidery on it, and suddenly realized, the color and white look is completely gone where the pattern is sewn. This. The shopkeeper of Buzwang swallowed. "How about 25 taels, miss, take it?" 25 seems a bit expensive to me." Sulayun chuckled, "If I remember correctly, because of the hoarding of Sichuan brocade last year, the price of Sichuan brocade this year is not expensive. Not to mention the rain silk brocade, a piece of cloth seems to be too expensive. The price is less than 10 taels, which is enough to make 3 pieces of clothing like this." The shopkeeper of Buzwang now completely understood. The young lady in front of him was not only knowledgeable about goods, but also proficient in them. Okay, you can just take these 15 taels of clothes." Lu Suya blinked and glanced at Sulayun first. Seeing her nodding, she motioned to Xiao to step forward and give the money. He went in and changed his clothes. Just as Lu Suya was changing clothes, another guest came in outside the door. The shopkeeper of the cloth shop came up to him. He seemed to be an acquaintance. "Here comes the Xiaozhou family. The fabric you asked me to order has been delivered." "Really, that's great." The voice sounded familiar. Sulayun raised his eyes, took a few glances, and recognized the person. It is Qinqiu, who has had a double relationship before. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 142. Chapter 142 Arena. Qinqiu seemed to feel something and raised his eyes and looked over. His eyes lit up immediately. "Miss Su." Qinqiu stepped forward quickly with a smile on his face. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Mrs. Zhou, long time no see." "Ms. Su, just call me Qinqiu, I can't bear to be called madam." Qinqiu couldn't help but be happy when she saw Sulayun. Sulayun was a little puzzled. She looked Qinqiu up and down, her eyes passing from Qinqiu's somewhat round cheeks to her waist. A guess came to mind. "You are pregnant." "I am pregnant." The two people spoke almost at the same time. After saying that, Sulayun and Qinqiu looked at each other and smiled. "Congratulations," Sulayun said. Qinqiu said quickly, "It's all because of Miss Su's prescription. I only drank it for less than half a month and got pregnant." Just as he was talking, Lu Suya came out from behind and handed the clothes she had changed to Xiao. Sister Yunur, Lu Suiya looked at Qingqiu. She felt that the other party looked familiar but couldn't remember it for a moment. Who is this? My name is Qingqiu. Miss Su saved my husband-in-law before and was the savior of our family. Lu Suiya was stunned for a moment, and then she remembered that Sulayun did save someone in Jade Tower last time. So, Sister Yunur does have medical skills? The last time I rescued someone, I was not lucky. At that time they thought Sister Yunur was just trying to please others. Turns out it's not. Hong Heiji poison from before, Sister Yunur could also see it. Lu Suiya realized that she seemed to have made a mistake at that time, and she felt a little guilty. Sulayun didn't sense Lu Suiya's thoughts. You are too polite. Miss Su, you don't even know that I have been thinking about meeting you since I got pregnant. I even talked about you to my husband-in-law yesterday, but I didn't expect to meet you today. Qingqiu grabbed Sulayun's hand with enthusiasm on his face. If you are free today, you must give me a chance to thank you anyway, okay? From her point of view, Sulayun, who saved her husband and allowed her to conceive a child, has become her reborn parent. How can she feel at ease if she doesn't even receive a thank you? I'm afraid I won't have any free time today. Sulayun could see Qingqiu's enthusiasm, but she was indeed a little busy today. Qingqiu shook her head. It's okay, Miss Su. If you are not free today, you will always be free. Miss Su, you also know where I live. When you are free, just ask the maid to come and tell me, and I will make preparations in advance. Seeing that he could not leave without agreeing, Sulayun smiled helplessly. Qingqiu is as strong as the last time he was in Jade Tower. Okay, if I'm free, I'll go. Then have we agreed? Qingqiu thought about it and felt worried again. Miss Su, can I know where your home is? I don't want to do anything. I'm afraid that you have many things to do. It would be bad if you forget. There is a bookstore over there. If you want to find me, you can go over there and someone will tell me. Sulayun thought for a while, but still didn't tell Qingqiu his identity. It's not that she doesn't trust Qingqiu, but she feels that with Qingqiu's temperament, if he goes to Su Mansion to find her, something might happen. Especially the fact that she has medical skills. Okay, I understand, Miss Su. Qingqiu was obviously in a much better mood now that he had a place to contact Sulayun. At the other end, the shopkeeper of Buzzwang also sorted out the things Lu Suiya and Qingqiu wanted and handed them to them. After leaving Buzzwang, Qingqiu walked in a different direction than Sulayun. Having no choice but to say goodbye to Sulayun first. After Qingqiu's figure walked away, Sulayun and Lu Suiya continued to walk to the next store. On the way, Lu Suiya asked curiously, Sister Yunur, how did you learn medical skills? Will cousin Shueya keep this matter secret for me? Sulayun met Lu Suiya's eyes and blinked. I almost made you embarrassed before, but you ignored it. I won't tell anyone about this. Although Lu Suiya didn't know why Sulayun was so kind to her, she rarely felt some sisterly friendship and naturally wanted to cherish it. Even if Sulayun didn't mention it, she wouldn't let it out casually. I learned it from a traveling doctor when I was in Jingzhou, but I just learned a little bit. No matter who you talk to about being born again, it will probably make people feel scared. For Sulayun, this matter will always be buried deep in his heart. Lu Suiya felt that Sulayun was hiding something, but for the moment she couldn't figure out what the problem was. The two of them walked and arrived at Zhenbao Pavilion. Before he even got close, he heard loud noises. Kuai hurried forward, squeezed through the crowd and watched for a while, then came out and said, Miss, it seems there is some kind of competition in Zhenbao Pavilion, and the arena has been set up. The competition was not very attractive to Sulayun and Lu Suiya. Several people walked through the crowd and went straight into the store. There were only a few scattered customers in the store, and there was only one waiter left to greet them. Guys, what do you want to see? The shopkeeper was probably not there either, but the waiter seemed a little leisurely and walked over in a leisurely manner. "Let's look at some jewelry." Lu Sui returned. The waiter groaned and pointed to one side. "Just go over there." What comes into view is the wall full of gold and silver jewelry, and there are also many on the cabinets. "You guys, let's see for yourselves first." Seeing another guest come in, the waiter greeted him after finishing speaking. Lu Sui picked for a while, but didn't choose. "Why don't you go up to the second floor and have a look, maybe there's something you like," Sulayun suggested. "This store also has a second floor." Lu Sui has been here a few times, and she doesn't know whether it was a coincidence or something, but she has never been to the second floor. Now that she heard Sulayun's words, she was still stunned. Sulayun pulled Lu Sui upstairs. Seeing the style of the second floor, Lu Sui was a little confused. "Sister Yunur, I'm afraid the money I brought is not enough." "Come up, let's take a look first." After all, Lu Sui was a little moved. After being persuaded by Sulayun, Lu Sui stepped forward and took a look. Just before I could see a few of them, I heard commotion coming from the windowsill. "There is a ring just under the windowsill." "I won, where are your things?" A voice like a drake came. Sulayun took a few steps and approached the windowsill. He saw several men dressed as guards surrounding the shopkeeper on the stage. "Su, Master Su, this cannot be calculated like this." "I said it can, what nonsense are you talking about?" The man with the drake voice has a round figure but not very tall. His face is shiny and he wears a fur coat, which makes him look a little unsightly. Sulayun noticed that there were two girls standing on the ring, looking at Suzian angrily but afraid to speak. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 143. Chapter 143, It's Too Easy. The shopkeeper looked embarrassed, but looked at the guards surrounding him and trembled slightly. People in the audience were talking a lot. Why is this like this? If someone else wins, it would be better for him to just take it away. What can we do? Suzian is not like this every day or two. Is there any royal method for this? Those voices were quiet. It was obvious that many people in the audience had complaints against Suzian but did not dare to speak out loud. Sulayun couldn't hear clearly and could only vaguely make out a few words. "Why don't you take your things out quickly?" Suzian lost his patience and stretched out his hand to push the shopkeeper. He didn't know whether it was too hard or the shopkeeper couldn't stand firm, so he was pushed down by Suzian. Seeing the scene where the shopkeeper fell to the ground in a panic, Suzian laughed as if he had seen an interesting scene. "You said this person is timid and can't even stand firmly, ha 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 ha." The guards around him also burst into laughter. The rest of the people frowned and looked at the scene in front of them. The two girls standing on the ring hurriedly stepped forward and helped the shopkeeper up. "Are you okay?" the older girl asked worriedly. "It's okay, no problem." The shopkeeper looked helpless and looked at the two sisters who had won the ring, showing a bit of bitterness. "This prize. Shopkeeper, just give it to Mr. Su." The eldest girl shook her head, not wanting the farce to continue. Even though the two sisters wanted to win the prize so they could sell it for money, when they met Suzian, it could only be said that they were unlucky. Suzian took a few steps forward and stood in front of the two sisters, showing a squinting look. "I didn't look carefully just now, but you two look pretty good. Why don't you follow me? These things will all belong to you, right?" After saying that, he reached out his hand and touched their cheeks. Before his hand could reach his face, he was blocked by someone. "Mr. Su, please respect yourself." Yang Shan stood in front of her sister and stared at Suzian with a cold expression. Suzian glanced at it for a few times, then laughed out loud. you jumped out in such a hurry, are you afraid that I won't see you, sir? Don't worry, sir, I have always been equally exposed to rain and dew, and I will not be partial to anyone. The fat hands stretched out again, but this time, Yang Shan did not move away. The guards had already caught her, leaving her no chance to resist. Let me go. Let go of my sister. Yang Wei, the younger sister, saw that her sister was caught, and quickly slapped several guards. However, the two sisters were no match for several men, so they were restrained one after another. Suzian touched Yang Shan's face in front of everyone, and then slowly moved his hand down. There were some women and girls in the audience who couldn't bear it and turned their faces away, not daring to look any further. Yang Shan closed her eyes, her face full of despair. Elder sister. Ah! Following Yang Wei's cry, Suzian let out a scream. Everyone looked and saw that there seemed to be a silver needle stuck on the back of Suzian's hand. Who is it? Who did it? Come out. Suzian suddenly pulled out the silver needle and looked around fiercely. But no one stood up. Suzian became more and more angry. Do you dare to do it or not? Who dares to attack me? If you stand up now, I can spare your life. Suddenly, Suzian, who was shouting, turned pale and his lips gradually turned purple. Hands touched his neck, and he knelt heavily on the ground. Master! The guards quickly gathered around and saw Suzian looking like he couldn't breathe and had been poisoned. Send the young master to the hospital quickly. In full view of everyone, Suzian was carried away by several guards. The people in the audience haven't reacted yet and are looking at it in confusion. At the windowsill on the second floor, Suleun put down his sleeves, withdrew his gaze, and turned to look at Lu Sueya. She had already chosen something, but when she asked about the price, she was completely stunned. A hairpin costs 130 taels. Are you here to steal money? Sister Yunur, let's go to another place to visit. Lu Sueya looked embarrassed. The money she brought out was no longer enough. But when she said this, her eyes were still unable to leave the hairpin. Suleun took a look and saw that the hairpin Lu Sueya selected had a dark green jewel on it, which was particularly suitable for the dress she bought. Isn't this pretty? Speaking of which, I said before that I would prepare a gift for cousin Shueya, so let me buy this hairpin. Sister Yunur, how can this be done? Lu Sueya hurriedly stopped Suleun. 130 taels, how could she get Suleun to pay this money? Cousin, please don't be polite to me. How can a hairpin repay Lu Sueya's kindness in her previous life? Suleun had other plans in mind. After accepting the hairpin, Lu Sueya didn't feel at ease. She became more and more confused. Why did Suleun treat her so well? Going down to the first floor, the two sisters who were on the ring were taking the money in exchange from the shopkeeper. Thank you, shopkeeper. You only exchanged this for 100 taels, but after all, I still made a profit. The shopkeeper shook his head and closed the box. Suleun took a glance and saw that there was a luminous pearl in the box. Although I can't see it clearly, just looking at that kind of body shape, it costs at least a few hundred taels. These sisters actually exchanged only 100 taels with the shopkeeper, which was very honest. We sisters also had good luck and won the game. The elder sister Yang Shan is particularly modest, while the younger sister Yang Wei is following her sister, looking a little afraid of strangers. As he spoke, Yang Shan asked in a low voice, "Shopkeeper, do you really not know who helped us?" "Of course I don't know. I'm curious as to who dares to teach Suzian a lesson." Suleun paused when he heard this. He looked at the shopkeeper and asked, "Is that person just now Suzian?" "Yes, most of the people here know him." Speaking of Suzian, the shopkeeper seemed to be full of resentment, but in the end he shook his head and reminded, "If you see that person, take a detour quickly. He is notoriously lecherous." "Isn't that right, I don't even know how many concubines the family has. Someone on the side echoed. Sulayun frowned even more. She really didn't know Suzian, but when she thought about the appearance of the person who proposed marriage to Luchin, she finally understood Luchin's dilemma. Even if we don't talk about Suzian's appearance, just looking at his character, will Luchin have a good life if she marries him? Sister Yunur, what's wrong with you? Have you been in a daze since you found out Suzian's name? On the way back home, Lu Shuiying asked worriedly. Sulayun came back to his senses. I just didn't expect that such a person could exist under the capital. It happens everywhere, even in the capital. How are some things different from other places? Lu Shuiya seemed to be remembering something and sighed. My cousin is right. Sulayun was calm, but there was a bit of coldness in his eyes. She was gentle just now. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 144. Chapter 144. Some blood loss. Su family. The doctors came in and out, but they all looked at a loss. What the is going on? You went out well, why did it end up like this? Su's father had a son in middle age, and he always doted on Suzian, so he became a dandy in the capital. Su's mother wiped her handkerchief and cried on the side, my son, if something happens to you, what will mother do? Mr. Su, Mrs. Su, you'd better hire another Gao Ming. Several doctors all gave the same answer. Father Su couldn't help but pull up a doctor's collar and asked, is it possible that our Su family is full of quack doctors? No one can tell it. The doctor's hands and feet were trembling. Mr. Su, our abilities are really limited. Roll. Su's father shook the man away and looked at the bed. Son, don't be afraid. Dad has sent someone to the palace to be your godfather. Don't worry, everything will get better. Suzian wailed all the way home from the medical clinic. Now he has lost his strength and his wailing has become hoarse. But the skin was tingling in waves. He scratched for a long time, and the skin was broken. Suzian, who is lying on the bed now, can see every good thing about him. Seeing Suzian still scratching, Su's father said, why don't you suppress the young master yet? Several servants hurried forward and restrained Suzian's hands and feet. But when I stopped scratching, the sting became stronger again. Suzian has never been tortured since he was a child. How could he bear it? He started to struggle immediately. Even though his strength was low, the servants had to be careful not to hurt him, so he was naturally struggled away. Son, please bear with me, what will you do if you arrest me again? Su's father grabbed Suzian's hand and said that he was thrown away before he finished speaking. Dad, it feels so uncomfortable, it feels so uncomfortable. Suzian scratched his body, but the stinging pain couldn't go away no matter what. His face and arms were covered in blood. Hunting and tears came out a lot. Son. Su's mother shouted sadly, rolled her eyes, and fainted. The maids quickly supported the lady and put her on a chair aside. The movements are quite familiar. You go find something and tie the young master's hands and feet. Father Su really couldn't watch Suzian torture himself like this. It showed that no one could hold Suzian down, so he had to find another way. Soon, the servants brought the rope. Tie Suzian's hands and feet. Just a moment later, Suzian struggled, and the rough hemp rope directly cut his wrists and ankles. There was more blood. Dad, let go of me, it hurts so much. Suzian shouted. Su's father quickly asked his servants to untie the rope. After a long time, he finally tied his hands and feet with fur. Sir, the doctor is here. The imperial physician followed behind the steward. Just as he entered the house, Suzian's wailing became weaker. Sir. Su's father was worried that something had happened and asked quickly. Seeing that Suzian was stunned, he said after a while, Dad, it doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. Father Su was a little surprised when he saw the blood on Suzian's face. It was like that just now. Why doesn't it hurt now? Mr. Su, let me take a look at Mr. Ling first. Well. Su's father made room for the imperial physician and watched anxiously. The imperial physician first took Suzian's pulse, and his expression changed from nervous at first to relaxed. Soon, he put down his hand and said, Mr. Su, Mr. Ling's pulse is stable. He just lost some blood, but there is no other problem. No other questions. Su's father couldn't believe his ears. Those doctors before said that it couldn't be cured and that it was an incurable disease. Why did the imperial doctor say that there was nothing wrong with it as soon as he came? Are you sure? Hearing Su's father's doubts, the imperial physician naturally felt uncomfortable and said, if Mr. Su doesn't believe it, you can find someone to take a look. Go and arrest those quack doctors. Su's father gave orders. Soon, the doctors who had checked Suzian's pulse were pushed in by servants. Several people took turns stepping forward to check Suzian's pulse, and their expressions became ugly. It was clear that the pulse condition just now was still terminal, so why does it look like there is absolutely no problem now? What's going on? Tell me quickly. Su's father stared at the doctors and shouted angrily. The doctors quickly lowered their heads and replied, Master, it seems that everything is fine. Is everything okay? When Father Su heard this answer, he didn't know whether he should be happy that Suzian finally didn't have to suffer the same pain just now, or whether he should be angry that the doctor in his house was so useless. Then tell me, what happened before, how come? Several doctors looked at each other, unable to come up with an explanation. On the contrary, the imperial doctor frowned. He was not blind, so he could naturally see what Suzian looked like now. But he checked his pulse and found nothing wrong. But would a normal person catch himself like this? Mr. Su, I have a few words to ask Mr. Ling. Excuse me. Su's father hurriedly arrived. The imperial doctor said, Master Su, why did you catch yourself like this? It hurts. My whole body hurts, but I can't find a place to hold it. I don't know what kind of pain it is. How strong is it? It hurts, it just hurts. Suzian shouted, the stinging pain just now disappeared, and now he has regained some strength. The doctor frowned and reached out to touch Suzian's face. Before he could move his hand, Suzian let out a wail. It hurts. Which one hurts more, this pain or the pain just now? This hurts, no, that hurts. Suzian couldn't recognize it for a moment. He felt pain just because of it. Now he can still remember how much it hurt, and he knows that he has suffered a great deal. In this way, the imperial doctor did not ask anything, but just prescribed medicine to Suzian to replenish his blood. The backyard of Lin Mansion, the embroidery room. Sulayun and Luchin were sitting on one side of the embroidered cloth, raising their hands and needles to carve on the embroidered cloth. Several busy girls gathered around and watched the two people's actions. The actions of Miss Su and Miss Lu are well connected. That's not the case, otherwise why would Mrs. Lin let the two of them sew this picture of 100 birds facing the phoenix? I didn't expect Miss Su to be so talented in embroidery. Sulayun and Luchin seemed not to have heard anything, and only focused on the work in front of them. It's okay to just hang around here, you guys are still so noisy. If something happens to Liyun and Luchin, I will have to settle the account with you. Mrs. Lin's laughing scolding sound came from behind. The girls quickly dispersed. Hello, Mrs. Lin. The reason why Liyun and Luchin are embroidering in this room is because they think that if you can learn a little bit, you will gain something. Don't just chat. Mrs. Lin, we know. After saying that, the girls quieted down and looked at the movements of Sulayun and Luchin seriously. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 145. Chapter 145, Forcing Girls into Prostitution. Seeing the serious postures of the girls, Sulayun and Luchin also slowed down their movements. Half an hour passed before the two of them stopped. A girl hurriedly came forward and asked Sulayun and Luchin for advice. After a lot of work, I finally had some free time. Looking at the sweat on Luchin's forehead, Sulayun frowned, and then realized that even though there was a ground dragon living indoors, Luchin was still wearing a scarf. The earth dragon in this room is on full blast, don't you feel hot? It's okay, I caught a cold last night. Luchin looked at Sulayun, his eyes twinkling. Sulayun felt something was wrong. Did something happen to you? It's nothing, don't worry about me. Miss Luchin, there is a man who calls himself your brother outside the house looking for you. A maid stood at the door and said. Luchin's expression changed, and she quickly stood up and walked out. I'll be there right away. Looking at her leaving figure, Sulayun still felt a little strange. He turned his eyes away and saw the ugly look on the face of the maid who came to report. Sulayun frowned even more. Why did the maid show such an expression? After waiting for a long time, Luchin did not come back. Instead, Mrs. Lin came. Her face looked particularly ugly. Mrs. Lin. Leun, come with me. Mrs. Lin looked serious. Sulayun's heart skipped a beat and he realized that something big had happened. She followed Mrs. Lin into the house. Mrs. Lin, what happened? Leun, if you were asked to sew the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix by yourself, would you be able to do it in time? Mrs. Lin's tone was a little heavy, and after speaking, she sighed heavily. Sulayun frowned and asked, Mrs. Lin, has something happened to Miss Lu? It only took so long, what happened? I don't know what happened. Mrs. Lin also looked helpless. She came to me just now and only said that she could no longer continue to sew the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. I tried to persuade her again and again, but she couldn't ask anything. If Luchin doesn't come, what will happen to the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix? Sulayun calculated the time in her mind and found that there was still 1.5 months until the Queen Mother's birthday party. If she made it overnight, she could catch up. It's just that now, she is more worried about Luchin. She doesn't know what happened that made her unable to continue sewing the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. Mrs. Lin, why don't you ask me to ask Miss Luchin? Maybe there is still room for change. Can it be done? If Luchin could come back, Mrs. Lin would naturally be happy. But she had been trying to persuade her for a while before, but Luchin looked determined and could not persuade her at all. Sulayun comforted her, it won't take me any time to go there. Don't worry, Mrs. Lin. It's just that I don't know where Miss Luchin lives yet. I need to ask Mrs. Lin to tell me. Of course that's no problem, I'll ask someone to take you there. What Sulayun said makes sense, but this is all we can do now. The boy who led the way took Sulayun and Quilayu to Luchin's home. Compared to Luchin's usual simple clothes, the door of Liu's house is particularly new, as if it had just been painted recently. Miss Su, would you like me to wait for you outside? The boy asked. Sulayun thought for a while and replied, no need, you can go back. Please lead the way. It's the younger ones' duties, so the younger ones will go first. The boy bowed and left. Quilayu stepped forward and knocked on the door. After waiting for a long time, a servant opened the door with a yawn. Who are you looking for? Is Miss Luchin here? As soon as he heard the word Luchin, the servant's expression changed and he reached out to close the door. With quick eyes and quick hands, Quilayu blocked the door. What you do? Miss is not here, so don't come looking for me. It's just that we're not here, so why should we close the door? Quilayu asked. The servant tried his best not to close the door. Seeing Quilayu push the door open, he had no choice but to let go. My lady is really not here, you are breaking into a house without permission. Hearing what the servant said, Sulayun was even more sure that something had happened. She took a step forward and said, Kuilu, go to the government to report the case and say someone is missing. Yes, miss. Kuilu turned around to leave. When the servant heard this, he panicked and grabbed Kuilu. What does the reporting officer do? Your lady clearly said she went home, but you said she didn't come back. Doesn't she mean she's missing? Sulayun looked at the servant coldly, making him tremble all over. Me? What's going on, are you making such a fuss? Master. The servant hurriedly ran behind the man who came over and whispered in his ear, Master, they are here to see the young lady. Looking for my sister. The man raised his eyebrows and looked at Sulayun, with a flash of light in his eyes. Come in. Sulayun looked the man up and down, and his eyebrows were indeed somewhat similar to Luchin's. It's just that the other person's expression is a bit vulgar, which makes people feel uncomfortable. If Luchin is not here, I will not go in. Sister is indeed not here, but I can tell you when she comes back what is the name of this young lady. My surname is Su. If you tell Luchin, she will naturally know. Sulayun nodded and left with Kuilu. After turning a corner, Sulayun looked at Kuilu and said, sneak in quietly and take a look. If you see Miss Luchin, come out and tell me. I understand, miss, you should be careful alone. Kuilu hurriedly walked towards the Lu family's courtyard wall, and soon she jumped over the wall and disappeared. After waiting for a moment, Kuilu climbed out of the wall. Miss, I saw Miss Luchin. Kuilu walked to Sulayun and leaned into her ear. I saw a lot of people standing outside Miss Luchin's house, so she didn't come close. Are there any other discoveries? The slave heard that they were talking about letting Miss Luchin get married. Kuilu looked puzzled. Does getting married require such a big battle? He even wanted to lock up the bride. Sulayun understood as soon as he heard this. She had met Suzian this morning. Luchin was not one to judge people by their appearance, but how could Luchin be willing to marry a scum like Suzian? The Lu family is trying to force good girls into prostitution. Go back first, we need to consider this matter in the long term. Sulayun looked gloomy and returned to the Su mansion. Late night. Luchin was leaning against the window, looking tired but unable to close her eyes. Suddenly, a stone hit the window sill. Luchin was startled, and quickly looked around, and saw two figures. Miss Lu, it's me, Kuilu. Kuilu, why are you here? Luchin couldn't help but widen his eyes when he heard Kuilu's voice, and looked at the people next to Kuilu. Is a man with a serious expression. He is Sun Wen, don't worry, the lady asked us to come. Hearing this, Luchin's eyes flashed. She did not expect that at this time, the person who came to care about her would be Sulayun, whom she had not known for long. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 146. Chapter 146. The Mysterious Moon Tower. Kuilu and Sun Wen entered the house. Let's go. Luchin suddenly spoke. Kuilu was stunned at first, but quickly took out the letter Sulayun had prepared from her arms and handed it to Luchin. Miss Lu, this is what Our Lady wrote to you. Luchin took the letter. There were only a few lines of words on it, but her expression changed. She folded the letter and put it in her sleeve. I'll go with you. Great, Miss Lu, let's go quickly. Seeing Luchin change his mind, Kuilu was happy and pushed the door open. The servants who were in charge had already fainted and fell to the ground. When the three of them arrived at the courtyard wall, Sun Wen said, Miss Lu, I'm offended. Sun Wen put his arm around Lu Qin's waist and jumped out with her. There was no one on the road, so Lu Qin followed Kui Lu and Sun Wen to the back door of Su Mansion. Kaya Huaziazu. Sulayun was sitting at the table when he heard a knock on the door. Lian Xian opened the door, and it was Kuilu and 3 others who came in. Miss Lu Qin. Sulayun stood up and stepped forward, looked at Lu Qin to make sure she was not injured, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Ms. Su, what do you mean by what you wrote in your letter? Lu Qin met Sulayun's gaze and took out the letter from his sleeve. Miss Lu Qin is so smart, she can't fail to understand. Sulayun did not explain, but when the two looked at each other, she knew that Lu Qin could understand. The house was dimly lit by candles. Lu Qin sat at the table and took a deep breath. Miss Su, why do you want to help me? If I say that Miss Lu and I hit it off, I guess you won't believe it, but there is really no reason to help you. What's more, the matter has not been finalized yet, and it is not certain whether I can help you. Sulayun has asked people to check on the Su family, but there is no news yet. The only thing that can be known is that the Su family has the support of people in the palace, and they do have a somewhat sideways attitude in the capital. But Mr. Su and Mrs. Su are actually peaceful people, and only their child Suzian is the one who does all the bad things. If there is no other way, I will not involve Miss Su. I thought that after saving you today, the relationship between us would be closer. Sulayun joked. Lu Qin was stunned for a moment, then thought of something and said, can I call you Layun? Although I am older than you, after getting along with you, I always feel that you are not much different from me in age. How about I call you Ah Qin? Good. Lu Qin chuckled lightly. Sulayun was worried that the Lu family would discover Lu Qin's whereabouts, so Sulayun did not leave Lu Qin to live in the Su family. Instead, Sun Wen was asked to take Lu Qin to the house he had purchased before. The next day, Sulayun asked Kuilu to bring a message to Mrs. Lin, telling Mrs. Lin that he would not go to the Lin mansion today. Then he left Su mansion and went to Lu Qin's residence first. Akin. Sulayun knocked on the door. Layun. Lu Qin quickly opened the door and welcomed Sulayun and others in. The house was kept clean, and Lian Xian put the breakfast she had brought on the table. I can't help but live here these days. It's much better than being watched over at home. Lu Qin smiled slightly. Sulayun pointed at the maid who was following Kuilu. Lian Xian and Kuilu are both my personal maids. It would be bad if you leave for a few days. However, I have arranged for people to be around to protect you, and the daily meals will also be provided. Someone left it at the door. If you need anything, just write it on a piece of paper and stick it outside the door. Sorry to bother you. It's no trouble. Since I took you out, these things should be done. Sulayun looked at the sky outside. It was already bright. I'm going to Yulo. I have some news about my family. I'll take you out. Lu Qin stood up and saw Sulayun to the door. Sulayun looked at Lu Qin's dark eyes and said, go back and have a good rest. At least your parents can't find you now, and they won't force you to marry Suzian. I got it, Layun, thank you. Lu Qin blinked to hide the tears in his eyes. Until she woke up this morning, she was in a trance, fearing that she was back home again. But after seeing Sulayun, this feeling of uneasiness finally dissipated. She really came out of the house. Kuilu and Liang Xin followed Sulayun, sighing for a while. Miss Lu is so miserable. That's right, no wonder the young lady looked so ugly yesterday when she found out that the man was Suzian. Kuilu frowned and shook her head. I really don't understand why Miss Liu's parents want to marry Miss Lu to such a person. Although the Su family is not very powerful, it is extremely rich and is still a popular candidate for the imperial business this year. The Lu family does not dare to offend such a person. Sulayun explained. But the next second, Sulayun stopped. Looking up at the pavilion not far away. Miss, is that the U Tower? Qilayu and Liang Xing glanced at each other, then quickly looked away, not daring to look any further. Even though it was daytime, they could not see the decoration of these pavilions. Isn't this a brothel? Why is that moon tower in a place like this? Sulayun learned about Yulo from Sun Wen, and knew that as long as he could afford the money, he could find out anything. That's why I made a special trip to Yu Tower. Looking at the surrounding buildings, she also became a little confused. Put on your veil and let's go over and have a look. Sun Wen should not have given the wrong address. Sulayun thought for a moment, covered the veil, and then walked away. Liang Xin and Qilayu looked at each other and hurriedly followed. The gate of Yu Tower is closed, and there is no plaque hanging on it. But Sulayun found the moon-shaped mark that Sun Wen mentioned and determined that this was the moon tower. She stepped forward and knocked on the door lightly, then twice. As soon as Sulayun put down his hand, the door opened. Even in daylight, the house is dark. Anyone there? Sulayun shouted, but there was no response. Miss, please go in first. Qilayu suggested. Sulayun thought for a while, let's come in together. This moon building is particularly weird. Sulayun entered the building, and Lian Xian and Qilayu hurriedly followed. The door was quietly closed. The room suddenly lit up. An old man stood at the foot of the stairs with a stooped body. You three, please come this way. I'm here too. Everyone who comes to Yu Tower is here to check the news, miss, please go upstairs. The old man interrupted Sulayun. Then he lifted his legs and stepped up the stairs. Sulayun didn't say anything more and followed the old man upstairs. The second floor is also bright. Sulayun then realized that the bright light was emitted by night pearls and was surrounded by walls. When you look at the house from outside, you can see that it has windows. Miss, please come this way. The old man stood in front of a door and bowed to signal. The layout of the house is extremely complicated. There are several small semicircular passages on the wall, which seem to be able to transport something. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 147. Chapter 147. Mother Lu is seriously ill. Sulayun entered the house. Lian Xian and Kui Lu were about to follow them when they saw the old man raising his hand to stop them. Sorry, I have to trouble you to wait outside the house. The old man opened his mouth. How could the two of them feel comfortable leaving Sulayun alone in the house? How is this okay? What if you want to hurt the lady? Qilayu is outspoken and expresses her thoughts subconsciously. Lian Xian quickly pulled off the green willow and smiled apologetically at the old man. It's okay, just wait for me outside. Sulayun nodded. Seeing this, Qilayu and Liang Xing could only take a step back and watched the door close in front of them. Inside the house. Miss, please sit down. The old man pointed to the chair in front of the wooden table and motioned to Sulayun. When Sulayun sat down, he also sat down on another chair. Just as a rope fell on his head, the old man stretched out his hand and pulled, and with a rustling sound, something drew out from the passage on the wall. Looking at this situation, Sulayun's eyes flashed, taking in this scene. The old man took out the rolled cylinder. Then he took out a few pieces of paper. These are the things you need, miss. Thanks. Sulayun reached out and took it. With only 3 pieces of paper, everything about the Su family was clearly written down. Looking from one person to another, Sulayun's expression didn't change much. Until I saw the last line of words. Eunuch Luo's master is Prince Yu, Xiao Jin. Sulayun's face darkened. He didn't expect that this matter could be related to King Yu. Eunuch Luo is the supporter of the Su family and the godfather of Suzian. Are you satisfied, miss? The old man asked. Sulayun raised his hand and burned the 3 pieces of paper with the candle light on the table. Seeing this scene, The old man's eyes flashed slightly. Seems a little surprised. I have one more person to send. I wonder who else you want to check, miss. Yuan, Xiaojin. Far to the northwest. A pure white dove flew into the barracks. The crossbow arrow flew out and hit the dove. Liu Feng picked up the dove, pulled out the arrow, and sent it into the camp. Your Highness. The mailbox was tied to Pigeon's leg, and Lu Feng took out the paper inside and handed it to Xiao Shenjiao. The man's slender fingertips traced across the paper. Fallen somewhere. A hint of smile appeared in his black eyes. She is very busy these days. Xiao Shenjiao frowned slightly when he saw the word Yuan. Why should we check King Yu? She has just returned to Beijing, what relationship can she have with King Yu? Xiao Shenjiao thought for a moment and wrote a reply. Lu Feng, send it back yourself. Your Highness. Lu Feng looked at Xiao Shenjiao, with rare confusion in his eyes. Let Black Eagle come to the northwest, and you go to Miss Su personally and protect her. Your Highness, why don't you let Black Eagle? Seeing Xiao Shenjiao's gloomy look, Liu Feng stopped talking and said, Yes, Your Highness. Lu Feng, you have been with me the longest. I feel more at ease when you protect Miss Su. I will not let you down. Having said that, Liu Feng was still puzzled. Just didn't dare to ask again. His Royal Highness has only met Miss Su a few times, so why is he so concerned about Miss Su? Even asked Elder Wuxin to receive Miss Su personally. Go and tidy up and set off early. Yes. Beijing, Lu family. Master, I still haven't found the lady. Roll. Lu he raised his leg and kicked the boy back to life, his face full of rage. Liu's father sat aside. What's the use of venting your anger on my servants? In a few days, the Su family will come to pick them up, but they can't hand them over. What will we do? What can I do? Didn't I ask you to send someone to look after her? How come a big living person disappeared? Lu he smashed the table fiercely. The teacup on the table was knocked to the ground. Is it your mother? I've also been watched over by your mother. It's impossible. Father Lu shook his head. Lu he frowned, and suddenly a figure appeared in front of his eyes. He thought of Suleun who came to see Lu Qin earlier. A woman named Su came to see her the day before yesterday. Lu he said. Could it be that she took away Lu Qin? Father Lu quickly guessed. Lu he licked his lips and said, let's go check on this person named Su first. Master, Master. The servant's voice came from not far away. Father Lu frowned, looked at the panicked boy who ran in, and said displeasedly, why are you panicking? Master, Su, someone from the Su family is here. Master Lu, I came uninvited, so please don't blame me. The visitor is the steward of the Su family. The servant behind him came in carrying many boxes. Liu's father hurriedly stood up to greet him. Why are Butler Su here in person? What are you doing? Looking at those boxes, Liu's father's brows jumped, and he felt something was wrong. With a smile on his face, Butler Su said loudly, Master Lu, I am here to deliver the betrothal gift. Our master has found someone to calculate the time. It will be a good day in 3 days. Good days. Father Liu's lips twitched. No matter how good the life was, the marriage would not be possible without the bride. Lu he was much calmer than Liu's father. He took a step forward and said calmly, Butler Su, don't worry. In 3 days, my sister will be waiting at Liu's house for Master Su to come and marry her. That's good, I've finished delivering the things and I'm leaving now. Steward Su smiled, turned, and left. Here, can you find your sister in 2 days? Of course. Lu he sneered. I want her to come back willingly. Miss, something happened. Kuliu ran into the house with an anxious look on her face. Suleun put down his pen, looked at the hurried Kuliu, and asked softly, What's the matter? People outside are saying that Miss Liu's mother is seriously ill and is about to die. About to die. Sulayun subconsciously felt something was wrong. In just one day, he became seriously ill? But if it was true, I had to tell Luchin. After only hesitating for a moment, Sulayun got up and went out to find Luchin. You said my mother is sick. That's what people outside are saying, and I've asked people to check it out. Sulayun looked at Luchin and couldn't help but said, I think it's a coincidence. I'm worried whether your parents deliberately leaked the news. I don't know either. Luchin sat in her seat with a troubled expression. My mother's health has indeed been not very good. She has been taking medicine these past few years, but she is not going to die in just a few days. She didn't say any more, and her expression became more and more nervous. Sulayun grabbed Luchin and comforted him, Don't worry, we'll wait for the news first. The atmosphere in the room was stagnant. Luchin couldn't sit still, so he stood up and walked around. My mother persuaded my father, and she didn't want me to marry Suzian, but how could my mother alone argue with my father and my brother? When my father wanted to lock me up, my mother wanted to stop me, but my father sent someone to lock him up. Maybe my mother really. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 148. Chapter 148 Men's Clothing. Miss Sun Wen pushed open the door and walked to Sulayun. Luchin's eyes lit up when he saw the other party, and he quickly asked, Is there any news about my mother? Sun Wen was silent for a moment, and then informed Sulayun of the situation. The Lu family is indeed in a bit of a mess. There are several doctors in the yard of Miss Liu's mother. It is difficult for subordinates to get close to them during the day, but it seems that something is going on. Mother. Luchin was shocked and couldn't control himself and ran out. Akin. Sulayun did not hold Luchin back. Looking at Luchin's leaving figure, Sulayun ordered, Sun Wen, follow up and watch the situation secretly. If anything happens, come back and tell me first. Sun Wen nodded and quickly followed Luchin. Miss, what should we do now? Do you want to help Miss Lu? Quilau asked worriedly. If Miss Lu goes through like this, if she falls into the trap, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to save her again. Lian Xian also had a worried look on her face, but she looked calmer than Quilau. Sulayun sighed softly, children are always worried when something happens to their parents. Even if the Lu family uses this to deceive Qin, they won't do anything to her. After all, they still want Luchin to marry into the Su family. Miss is right. Lian Xian echoed. Seeing Sulayun walking out, Lian Xian and Quilau followed. The three masters and servants left the house and walked to the lively street on one side. Where are you going, miss? Quilau whispered into Lian Xian's ear with a curious look on her face. Lian Xian pushed her and said, Miss, she has her own plans. After a while, the two of them followed Sulayun and arrived at the entrance of a casino. Lian Xian stepped forward and grabbed Sulayun, Miss, do you want to enter the casino? You reminded me, it's probably not a good idea to go in like this. Ah! Lian Xian was stunned. What did she remind the lady? Sulayun stared at the entrance of the casino for a long time. After a while, he had an idea. Coming out of the cloth village, Quilau and Liangzin looked at their clothes and tugged at them helplessly. In front of him, Sulayun was also wearing men's clothing. She turned to look at Quilau and Liangzin, looked them up and down, and nodded with satisfaction. Miss. Remember to call me young master, but your voices don't sound alike. Sulayun quickly interrupted the two of them. After thinking for a while, he took out 3 black pills from his sleeve and handed them to them. Little, master, what is this? I can change your voice temporarily, but it only lasts for half an hour. As he said that, Sulayun took one pill in his mouth. The other two pills were also eaten by Liangzin and Kuilu. The throat felt hot for a while, and when they spoke again after a while, Lian Xian and Kuilu's voices became deeper. "Master, was this the way you used to change your voice last time?" Kuilu remembered Sulayun's deep voice when she faced Suchongzhong last time. At that time, she thought the lady was disguised by herself. "Let's go." Sulayun turned around and walked towards the casino. Standing at the entrance of the casino, the two of them were far more nervous than before. This is the first time they have worn men's clothes and entered a casino. On the other hand, Sulayun looked calm and walked into the casino calmly. The smell of smoke mixed with the smell of sweat, and the whole casino was filled with smoke. The gambling tables are filled with people whose eyes are red from gambling. The cheers and angry sounds one after another made people frown. Lian Xian and Kuilu carefully followed Sulayun and pushed away the crowd for her. "Master, what are we doing here?" "Of course the reason for entering a casino is to gamble." Sulayun walked towards the gambling table with the most people. As soon as he squeezed through the crowd, he saw the man in front of the gambling table who had lost everything and started to curse. "Impossible. This is impossible. I can't lose. You are cheating." The man yelled loudly, "How could the people in the casino let him continue to make trouble?" Someone immediately stepped forward, grabbed the man, and threw him out. Seeing this scene, Lian Xian and Kuilu felt their hearts trembling. Looking at Sulayun in front of the gambling table. Once something happens to Sulayun, the two of them will take action. Standing in front of the gambling table, Sulayun looked at it. It was a gambling table of different sizes. At this time, the dealer has already started rolling the dice, and people around him have also begun to place bets. Sulayun waited for a moment and placed a piece of silver on the table. When the dealer takes the cover, the sum of the 6 dice is exactly 14. Means small. After playing more than 10 games in succession, Lian Xian and Kuilu watched helplessly as the gambling capital in front of their young ladies increased from 1 ingot of silver to several more silver notes and taels of silver. The two of them looked at each other and saw shock in their eyes. "Miss, not only can you bet, but you can also win everything?" Some people had noticed Sulayun's behavior a long time ago, and those who were smart enough to guess it followed Sulayun. The result is always an accurate guess. The banker's face was also ugly. Of course, the purpose of opening a casino is to make money. How can one always give money to gamblers? The dealer's eyes darkened and his hand moved slightly. Just waiting for Sulayun to place a bet. Sulayun suddenly smiled, gathered up all the gambling money on the table, and put it into the cloth bag he had prepared before. After wrapping up the cloth, Sulayun picked up the cloth bag and went straight away. The person at the casino door stretched out his hand to stop her. "This young master, I'm afraid you can't leave yet." Two people stood on either side of Sulayun, clearly not giving her a chance to escape. Sulayun had no intention of running away. "Why? We suspect you are a cheater, come with us." Without giving Sulayun a chance to refuse, the two men raised their hands and pressed down Sulayun's arms. "A cheater?" Sulayun's face immediately darkened. "Are you crazy? Are you saying that I'm a cheater? Do you know who I am?" Looking at Sulayun's calm look, the two thugs hesitated for a moment. Seems like he's worried about offending someone powerful. "Who is the boss of your casino? Tell him to come out and see me in person." Sulayun glanced at the two of them coldly, turned around, pushed open the room on one side, and walked in. There is also a gambling table in the house, but there are not many people. Seeing this scene, several gamblers hurried out of the house for fear of getting into trouble. Sulayun pulled up a chair and sat down with an imposing manner. Lian Xian and Kuilu wanted to follow, but when Sulayun winked at them, they did not come in, but stood outside the door. "The two thugs who wanted to catch Sulayun earlier looked at me and I looked at you. One of them whispered, "You watch here, I'll go find the boss." After saying that, the person ran over. After a while, a middle-aged man in fine clothes walked over. Seeing Sulayun in the room, the middle-aged man frowned and stepped forward. "Are you looking for me? Are you the boss of this casino? Who are you?" The middle-aged man was very cautious and looked at Sulayun. Sulayun met the middle-aged man's gaze and suddenly smiled. "Who am I? Can't you guess it?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 149. Chapter 149. Mr. Wu. Looking at Sulayun being so calm, the middle-aged man felt a sudden shock in his heart. The middle-aged man frowned and observed Sulayun, but he couldn't figure out who she was. "You're not pretending to be a ghost, are you?" he snorted coldly, testing it. Sulayun's mouth curved a little wider. "Are you saying that eunuch Luo sent me here just to show off?" "Luo?" The middle-aged man quickly covered his mouth and looked at Sulayun in disbelief. "What can you prove?" "Why should I prove it to you? This casino belongs to eunuch Luo. I don't think he knows much about it. If you don't believe it, you can ask eunuch Luo, if you can. You come with me." The middle-aged man stared at Sulayun for a long time and whispered. Sulayun nodded, stood up and followed the middle-aged man to the second floor of the gambling house. Qilayu and Liang Xin wanted to follow, but were stopped. "You guys wait for me downstairs." Sulayun gave the order. Going up to the second floor, the surroundings were much quieter. "I don't know how to call you." The middle-aged man rubbed his hands and asked. "Cao Tian Wu." "Master Wu." The thugs brought a chair for Sulayun to sit down. The middle-aged man sat on the other side and asked somewhat flatteringly, "Mr. Wu, I didn't know you were here. Does eunuch Luo have any orders?" "Eunuch Luo wanted me to take the account book and give it to him." "Account books?" The middle-aged man looked confused. "I'm afraid I can't make the decision on this matter. I have to ask others." Sulayun leaned forward and looked at the middle-aged man. "The reason why eunuch Luo asked me to come is because he didn't want the Su family to know." "Eunuch Luo, do you doubt the Su family?" The middle-aged man looked at Sulayun's expression and asked with some suspicion. Sulayun's face turned cold and he leaned back on his chair. "The Su family has done a lot of things for eunuch Luo in the past few years. Eunuch Luo didn't want to doubt them. I'll get the account book right away." "Trouble." Sulayun chuckled and watched the middle-aged man walk out of the room. After a while, he came over with 2 account books in hand. "The previous account books have been taken away by the Su family, and I only have these 2 books left here." The middle-aged man handed the account book to Sulayun and was about to say something when a thug ran up and leaned into his ear and said something. His expression changed slightly, and he glanced at Sulayun without any trace. "Mr. Wu, I may ask you to wait for a moment." Sulayun lowered his eyes and said, "Please do it." The middle-aged man winked at the thugs on the side, and they walked out of the house and closed the door. There was a rustling sound, and Sulayun stood up and walked to the door, pushing it gently. It was indeed locked. "Miss." Kui Liu's voice came from behind. Sulayun turned around and saw that the window was wide open and Kui Liu was sticking his head out. Sulayun stepped forward and asked, "Who is coming?" "He's from the Su family, he said he's here to collect the debt." Qilayu pulled Sulayun out of the house, and the 2 of them walked along the eaves. Fortunately, there were no people in the alley on this side, so no one would see them walking on the eaves. At this moment, there was a sound from the window. "Boss, the person is missing." "Miss." Sulayun quickly lowered his head and looked down, then was stunned. Beside Lian Xian stood a particularly familiar man. Sulayun and the other three had just changed out of their clothes when they saw several thugs walking past the entrance of the cloth village with nervous expressions on their faces. "Miss Su, I will send the account book to Dali Temple." Lai Yufeng hid the two account books in his arms and handed them to Sulayun. When Sulayun recognized Lu Feng, she almost immediately thought of Xiao Shenjiao. She didn't expect that the other party would actually send Lu Feng back. But after thinking about it, Sulayun became suspicious again. Could it be that Xiao Shenjiao sent someone to monitor her? Otherwise, why would she know what she was doing? "Then I'll trouble you." Facing Lu Feng, Sulayun didn't ask any unpleasant questions. After Lai Yufeng had gone far, the three masters and servants hurriedly walked towards the Su mansion. Before reaching the door, Kuliu frowned and said, "Miss, isn't that Miss Lu Qin's brother?" "Who?" Sulayun looked at the man standing at the door of Su mansion and frowned tightly. "Who is he looking for?" As he walked to the door of the mansion, the servant's eyes lit up. "Second miss, Mr. Lu said he is here to see you." "Miss Su, we meet again." Lu He turned to look at Sulayun, with a meaningful smile on his face. Sulayun met Lu He's cold eyes and chuckled, "Are you, Miss Lu Qin's younger brother?" "I am here, my name is Liu He." Lu He held his hand to Sulayun, which seemed to be very polite. Can feel the aura around him, and Sulayun felt a little uneasy. "Why did you come to see me?" "Miss Su went to see my sister the day before yesterday. I just wanted to ask if Miss Su has seen my sister." "Miss Lu Qin is missing." Sulayun was stunned and asked in surprise. The look on her face was so real that Lu He couldn't see the problem for a moment. "Is it possible that it has nothing to do with her? I haven't seen Miss Lu Qin in the past 2 days since she is missing. I'd better report her to the government earlier." Sulayun hurriedly spoke again, revealing his concern for Lu Qin. Lu He raised his eyebrows and said, "I will. I'm sorry to bother Miss Su. Lu Qin has returned home long ago, so why should he report to the official? It's just that this matter really has nothing to do with Sulayun." Looking at Lu He's leaving voice, Sulayun's expression calmed down and he entered the Su mansion. "Miss, my servant didn't say your name that day, right?" Kui Lu thought about it carefully and made sure that she had never said Sulayun's name. How did Lu He know about it? "As long as I go to Lin Mansion and ask, I will naturally know my identity. What I am worried about now is Lu Qin." Sulayun frowned, wondering what the situation was like at Lu Qin's side. After dinner, Sulayun was applying facial cream on his face after taking a shower. "I heard someone knocking on the door." "Miss, this is Sun Wen." Lian Xian opened the door, saw the people outside, and quickly told Sulayun. Sulayun put on his coat and then let Sun Wen in. "Miss, nothing happened to Miss Lu Qin's mother." Sure enough. When he saw Liu He, Sulayun was convinced. Now it is just more certain. "What about Ah Qin's situation?" "Miss Lu has been locked up. This time there are more people guarding her than before, and there are people guarding her in the house." Listening to Sun Wen's words, Sulayun sighed softly, "As long as everything is fine." "Miss, it's not okay." Sun Wen looked hesitant. "I heard that in 3 days, the Su family will come to marry Miss Lu." 3 days, how could it be so sudden? Previously, it was said that it was after the Queen Mother's birthday party. Sulayun pursed his lips and thought about it. There were only 3 days left, so he had to hurry up and take action against the Su family. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 150. Chapter 150 Visiting Lu Qin. The next day, Sulayun sat in front of the dressing table and let Lian Xian wipe her face. "Miss, you didn't sleep last night, okay?" Lian Xian looked at the dark green eyes of Sulayun and asked softly. Hearing this, Sulayun, who was still a little troubled, came back to his senses, looked at himself in the bronze mirror, and sighed. She really didn't sleep well last night. It seemed like he had a nightmare. Just wake up and don't remember anything. Sulayun rubbed his forehead, and Kualayu just pushed the door in. There was a piece of clothes looming beside the door. Who else is out there? She asked. Lian Xian also looked over curiously. Kualayu grinned and whispered, Miss, it's Lai Yufeng. Let him in. After entering the room, Lai Yufeng stood in a corner awkwardly. This was his first time entering a woman's boudoir, so he was a little at a loss. Sulayun saw something was wrong with Lu Feng, covered his eyes and smiled, Your prince asked you to follow me. That's what the prince indeed means. Lai Yufeng lowered his head and answered. Sulayun glanced at it a few times and asked, Then what do you think? What does Miss Su mean by this? Hearing these words, Lai Yufeng finally raised his head and looked at Sulayun in confusion. You are a subordinate of King Jin. If you are noticed by others when you are following me, it will not be a good thing. In fact, you don't need to follow me. My subordinates dare not disobey the prince's orders. Sulayun looked away. She could tell that Lu Feng didn't want to follow her, but this was Xiao Shenjiao's order and he would not disobey it. But what she just said was not an excuse. Lai Yufeng had always been by Xiao Shenjiao's side, and now that he appeared next to her and was noticed by others, wouldn't it mean that some rumors would spread again? Lu Feng, can I trouble you with something? Don't worry, Miss Su, I won't appear in front of others on weekdays. Lai Yufeng understood Sulayun's worries and nodded. Seeing this, Sulayun breathed a sigh of relief. That's when I asked about the account books. Will those 2 account books be useful if they are sent to Dali Temple? It's hard to say. Lai Yufeng shook his head, it still depends on the investigation of Dali Temple. The rest of the account books are in the Su family. Can you think of a way to take out those account books as well? Sulayun asked. Lai Yufeng thought for a moment and said, I'll figure this out. After saying that, Lai Yufeng left the house and disappeared after a while. Sulayun sighed and stood up, Lian Xian, Kui Lu, please accompany me to Liu's house. Miss, are you going to rescue Miss Lu again? Kualayu took a step forward, her face showing a bit of anxiety. Lian Xian didn't think so, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to rescue Miss Lu this time. It's naturally not going to be that easy the second time. I have no intention of rescuing Ah Qin, I'm just going to visit her. Sulayun stood up and Lian Xian put a coat on her. The 3 of them were about to leave Su Mansion when they saw several carriages parked at the door. Su Changjing directed his servants to carry things to the carriage. And Sulayun stepped forward and said hello. Seeing Sulayun, Su Changjing only glanced at him and said coldly, Leun is going out. Well, something happened to a friend, and I was just going to. Be careful, don't break things. Su Changjing saw that the servant almost dropped the box and shouted quickly. After the box was safely loaded onto the carriage, she looked at Sulayun and said, then go quickly. It was obvious that he didn't want to say more to Sulayun. Sulayun was not annoyed and bowed to Su Changjing appropriately, the niece will leave first. Su Changjing nodded coldly, turned around and continued to direct. Sulayun smiled and turned to leave. The Lu family is not close to the Su residence. It took about 2/4 of an hour for the 3 of them to arrive at the Lu family. Kualayu stepped forward and knocked on the door. The boy who opened the door was the same boy from a few days ago. It's you. The boy opened the door and said, are you here to see the lady? The lady has come back. Is Miss Lu Qin back? Sulayun took a step forward and asked. Yes, I came back yesterday. Then can I go in and see her? The boy hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Su, please. Sulayun nodded and entered Liu's house with Kualayu and Liang Xin. The boy leads the way. Just after passing a rockery, Liu he came over. Miss Su. Lu he saw Sulayun and walked forward in a few steps, You are here to see your sister, right? She is in her room, I will take you there. He glanced at the boy, who quickly lowered his head and walked away. Sulayun hid the disgust in his eyes as he listened to Luhi's words about sister. You call her sister, but what you want to do is to push your sister into a pit of fire. I'd like Mr. Lu to lead the way, please. No trouble, no trouble. Luhi walked in front to guide Sulayun, and soon he arrived at Lu Qin's yard. There were many people standing in the yard. When they saw Luhi coming in, they all saluted, "Young master. How is your sister feeling?" "Go back to the young master, the young lady is in the house, there is nothing to do for the time being." "That's good." Luhi sighed, looked at Sulayun, and explained, "Miss Su, you should have heard that my mother is not doing well these days. My sister is very worried about her and is a little nervous. I was afraid that she couldn't take care of herself, so I asked the servants in the family to take good care of her." "Yeah?" Sulayun asked with a smile, but without waiting for Luhi's answer, he walked to Lu Qin's house. Then he knocked on the door. "Akin, it's me. Yun." Lu Qin's weak voice came from inside the room. "Sister, I'm here too." Hearing Luhi's voice, someone finally came to open the door. The servants in the room saw Luhi and said, "Master. You all go out first." "Yes." The three maids in the room lowered their heads and left the room. Luhi opened the door and said, "Miss Su, please." "Akin." Sulayun looked at Lu Qin in the room, walked forward quickly, and took her hand. Lu Qin's eyes were a little red when she saw Sulayun, but she endured it and said, "Layun, I've made you worried. Mrs. Lin is more worried about you. You also know that if you can't complete the embroidery before the Queen Mother's birthday, Mrs. Lin will be so angry that she will vomit blood. Does Mrs. Lin know that you said that about her?" Lu Qin heard what Sulayun meant and followed her words. Sulayun patted her hand and said, "I also know that your mother is seriously ill, but at this time, if you are not here, I really can't finish the embroidery by myself. You should go to the Lin mansion with me tomorrow, right?" "But..." Lu Qin looked hesitant and looked up at Luhi on one side. Luhi's expression remained unchanged and he said, "Mrs. Lin's affairs are also very important, but sister, you are getting married in 2 days. Why don't you wait until the wedding banquet is over?" End of this chapter.